Welcome back, everybody, to Exceptionally
Average.
My name's Steve Harris. Alongside me is my buddy,
Craig Flack.
And thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Craig, welcome back. It's just been a fantastic winter. Are you enjoying the snowfall lately, and the rain, and the sunshine, and the hot weather, and the wind?
My folks are down in Florida. They're snowbirds. And let's just say the other day when it was snowing like crazy in Ohio, my mom sent me a picture of my dad just sitting outside reading a book or something. And I was like, yeah, I get the snowbird thing. I get it. I don't know why I live here, where the air hurts my face.
Exactly. No question about that. I struggle with it daily, but as they say, you wake up the next day and the weather has changed and then you experience something different.
Now, you've got an episode for us today, Steve, that you've kind of dreamed up, thought up, that's going to get us canceled for sure.
This sure
is the
will.
Last episode of Exceptionally Average.
It's the last one. We're going to go out with a bang. I'll tell you that we'll put it that way. It might be a shorter episode, and that's okay, but we'll be out of here and we'll duck for cover after it's over.
Yeah,
but I got to tell you.
Set for sale.
I have to tell you where my head's at right now, and I brought this up to you, and I wanted to talk about this because right now it's frustrating me, and it really is frustrating me. I look around, and over the last month or so, I have found myself in environments or situations where I'm surrounded by some people, not family, but surrounded by some people that find themselves as victims. Now, let me explain something. I think it's okay to be a victim because victimization happens. We can agree on that all day long. Victimization is an event that happens to us, and some events are very bad. Some events are downright despicable that happen to us, where we have no control over the situation.
Others do things to us.
That's correct. However, we make a choice, I believe, and I think you do too, that this victimization can be an event that happens, but it doesn't need to be a life sentence that we must experience for a period of time.
Maybe even better said, a lifestyle.
A lifestyle. Because given social media right now, and given just our... You know what? We have this kind of a snowflake culture. I'm sorry. I feel that way.
I told them we're getting canceled.
We have a snowflake culture where we take great joy and pride in being the victim. We've said before, or we think before, and we hear others, when we tell somebody that we are experiencing something that, hey, maybe it's not such a great day. Oh, well, let me tell you about my day. You think your day's bad. And it just steamrolls from there. Now, again, bad things have happened to everybody. There's been horrible, deplorable things that have happened to some. I don't want us to become a culture that resides in the lifestyle of victimhood. I understand the event, but we have a responsibility as adults to move past that and not sit back, fold arms, and smile and almost brag about the fact that we're a victim. And I want to see us move past that.
Why do you feel like this has become such a thing in our culture? Because I definitely see it. There's not a listener who's going to listen to us talk and isn't going to see it. Why do you think this victimization culture, is it for clout? Is it for using it as an excuse? Why do you think it's become such a thing, this kind of victimization culture?
I think social media is a big contributor.
Probably. Because the sob story goes better, or like, woe was me, and people, hey, I'm so sorry. And is that...
I believe that. You have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything else, whatever it might be, Snapchat, that we post our sob story and we get satisfaction from those who respond to us. And we're not seeking help to move past our victimhood.
No.
What we're seeking is confirmation that it's okay to be the victim and live that lifestyle. And that is wrong. It's not in Christian love. It's not in Christian faith. It does not promote overall health and good relationships. All it promotes is more victimization. And the more victims that we seem to have or obtain or surround ourselves with, the more in vogue it is to be the victim.
Well, and then it becomes everyone has to search for something. Because if you're sitting in a room and everyone's pulling out their victim card and saying, hey, this happened to me and this happened to me, it's like, oh, man, I
got to come up with something.
I don't have anything that happened to me. And it's like, you got a couple straight white guys in the room. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
I had a learning disability.
Right. Right. Or
it was hard for me to read.
or I ate too much pizza on Saturday night. It's a situation where we make it more than an event.
Mm-hmm.
And I see people wanting to tell their story, and I think that that's great. I think stories that we experience are meant to be told. They're not our stories. They belong to others, but they belong to others in a manner that helps others move past situations.
The fact that you were victimized doesn't have to be your whole story.
It doesn't.
And
it's
what
a
you're
moment.
seeing is that's where people are putting the period. That happened. That's now my life. This is my story versus this is what happened. This is how it shaped my story, but this is how I'm moving on from it.
It's the recognition that we get from being a victim. It sometimes seems like, why don't they move on? Well, my opinion on that is it's challenging to move on. Moving on is hard.
Yes.
And when we decide to move on, I think some people are afraid that they leave that event behind them and it no longer validates the experience and the struggle that they went through.
Well, because if we're honest, and again, people aren't going to like some of this, but I
No.
think we're being fair.
We're not for everybody.
Yeah. If something bad happened to you, and then you're just kind of not a great person, you're mean, you're lousy towards others, but then you say, well, my dad was mean to me. I had an abusive father. I'm not making light of that. It's a horrific thing to have parental abuse. But then if you just carry it on, it's like, you don't know what happened to me. It's like,
right.
There's a built-in excuse for not being a great person yourself. I never had an opportunity because I did this. And what we're trying to encourage people today is the things that happen to you don't have to define you.
Right.
And actually, we would argue, and this is where the challenge is, you have an obligation to overcome them.
You absolutely do.
And I recognize, let's just be very clear, this is not said without sympathy and love. And it's also not said with, you might need some help. You might need a brother or sister to come alongside you. You might need counseling. You might need a doctor. Some people are forced to walk Everest, and that's not fair. But it is some people's lot in life to walk Everest.
It sure is. I completely agree with that. Now, when we reach out on Facebook or we seek the encouragement of others, there are moments where people like you and me will say, hey, you need to do those things that you just mentioned. You need to seek counseling. You need to talk to a friend. You need to go talk to your pastor, whatever that might be. This might be your lot in life, and this might be the road that you need to struggle along for 2 months, 2 years, 10 years. I don't know what that is, but there's a reason you're walking this path. But it's our responsibility, whatever that timeline is, to move past that. And when others come along like you and I and say, you need to do these things, it's a great argument and fallback for that victim to say, oh, well, you don't understand. Mm-hmm. You don't walk a mile in my shoes. You're being cruel. You're being mean to me. Why aren't you being understanding? And ultimately, we end up in this overly compassionate, which isn't really compassion at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are jumping in and feeling sorry for and perpetuating this victimization of others, they're walking the wrong path with this person, and they're not presenting themselves as they should in Christian faith.
Yeah, that's the hard thing is it sounds like tough love, and maybe sometimes it is. It's a tough thing. But just allowing people to stay where they're at isn't always loving.
Mm-mm.
To stay stuck in that rut, to say, actually, you're more than the bad things that have happened to you. You're more than the mistakes you've made, even. Because some people are, let's be honest, some people are victims of themselves. You know, some people have some bad situations happen, but a lot of people make a lot of dumb mistakes, and then they just kind of are stuck in it. I know plenty of guys that blew up their marriage, and now their wife is taking those fall photos that they always refuse to with some other guy, and their kids look, you know, call him dad, and they're like, oh my gosh, I blew this all up. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And no one else made you do it. Are you going to stay there? Are you going to grow? Or are you going to learn? You're going to you going to have that be a part of your story, or are you going to have that be your story?
Right. And it can be your story, and it doesn't need to be the story.
Yeah.
It does not define who you are. It can be a moment in time. We've discussed it. I've addressed it. I'm moving on. Hey, if you need help moving past a similar situation, I've got a story for you that I can share that is meant to help you. And I want to show you how I got past it, how I no longer live in that house. Let me give you an example. You and I, we all grow up in a house. We choose to buy a house. Sometimes that house, we might look around and see that the paint is falling off the wall. Maybe the floorboard is mushy and we're about to fall through the floor into the basement. Maybe the roof is leaking. Maybe we've got bad plumbing. Whatever it might be, that house is falling apart. We cannot just put a coat of paint on the wall and say that we're good and just say, yeah, this is my house. Yeah, it sucks. I hate living here. Guess what? We're allowed to move. We're allowed to sell that house, give up that property, never go back there again, and we're allowed to upgrade to a better home. Now, we do that in society. We move houses. You've changed cities. I've changed cities. That's how we've been able to move, literally. Others aren't willing to move emotionally. They want to live in that same house with the paint falling on the wall, off the wall, with the roof leaking. They want to complain about it, but they don't want to move. And those are the people that I struggle with, because you have options. Look at all the houses on the market out there right now. Affordable houses at that. And they're upgrades. Let's move into one of those houses. Oh, no, I don't want to do that.
What do you think keeps people there? And we talked a little bit about it, but do you think beyond just, well, that's this thing, is it just the fear? The fear of giving it up? The fear, like, we like, it's like, but this is the only house I've ever known?
I have to wonder. I think that people are scared of the way we grow personally is by being stretched, being put into situations where we must change. And change, whether it's good or bad, can be a little bit traumatizing. You know, you can have a good thing happen to you, like a birth of a child, and that's change. And while it's exciting, it's also a little bit traumatizing, right? You're changing everything about what you're doing. So change is tough for people, but change is inevitable. And if we're willing to invest in that chaos and figure it out and be able to work through it and say, I'm going to get to the other side. Now we're talking about people like you and I, and hopefully viewers out there that are very similar and want to move past and get past the trauma or the victimization as an event. And we're going to live a different life after that. Others just choose, you know what? I'm really scared about the darkness that's ahead. I can't see the forest through the trees. It's just really dark. I'm just going to stay right here because this is what I know. And sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
Because the truth is, if you've experienced a lot of trauma and pain, a lot of times you have to go back and face it to deal with it. And that is really, really painful. And
we're not denying that happens. We're not dismissing that.
No, there is nothing that if someone is trying to walk in bettering themselves. So if you tell me I had this, I was abused and this is why the way I am, period. I'm going to think one thing. And then you say I was abused and this is why I am. And I'm working with a counselor to overcome it. And I've got these skills and I'm not perfect at it because I get taken back, but I'm striving to do better. Very different answers to the same exact situation. There are people in this life, and most of them have had really bad things happen to them that we go, wow, look at how they've overcome that. There's a woman that I got to know about her this summer, Rachel Dahlhauser. I might be pronouncing her last name a little bit wrong, but that's the general, it's a long, Rachel Dahlhausing or Hauser. She was one of Larry Nassar's abuse victims at Michigan State. She was sexually assaulted by...
The gymnastics situation at Michigan State.
She was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar. She has taken her story. She's written a book now to little girls who have been sexually abused how it's not their fault, how they didn't do this, and how to move forward in life. She started a victims advocacy group that persecutes and holds abusers accountable. She shared her story of like how it went under the radar and why she was afraid to come up. And she's taken back control in her narrative. She's a Christian woman, and she's helping the churches deal with the dark abuse that's happened in church circles and stuff.
Right.
And this is this person who had something horrific. The worst of type of abuse we would all argue is sexual in
Agreed.
nature. She's taking what happened to her and she has turned it on its head and said, this won't be my story. In fact, it will be my story in a way that I am going to overcome it and I'm going to help others with me. I'm going to bring others with me. I look at that and there is such tremendous power in that. And there's such tremendous like, wow, look at this woman. Like, this is incredible. That is why when we say like, leave the victimhood behind.
Yeah.
It's because I'm watching what people are doing. I'm sure it is immensely painful. I'm sure there's days where she has to mix it up with people who ask really awful questions of people who've been abused. Of why were you wearing, these awful things people have said?
Why'd you put yourself in
why
that situation?
Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why didn't you do like awful things? And that's not what we're doing.
No.
We're saying, look at her. Look what, or people like her that have been
Look how
able
she's
to overcome
overcome
this. There are people who have been in car accidents, cancer, these things that this happens to them and they allow it to be a part of their story rather than be their story. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of strength to do that. And I guess one of our biggest points today is just don't fall for the culture that says, actually, the cool thing about your story is that you're a victim.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do anything. And then you can be mad at the world. And then it's capitalism that screwed you. Or then it's your parents that screwed you. Or then it's the church that screwed. Like, you've got trauma and you've got abuse and you're a victim. And you can actually just complain for the rest of your days. And other victims will come and say, oh, that's really bad. That really bad. I'm also going to complain now. And then you're going to reciprocate. And we can just stay exactly where we're at.
And then I'm going to vomit.
And then 2 years from now, we'll tell the same exact story.
Well, here's what I see is it's an invitation when you live in that victimhood and you choose to live in a victimhood, that it's an invitation to others, hey, come live in this chaos, in this mess, in this filth with me. I want to invite you into my world and you'll find out how comfortable it is. Come and live with me here. Come and stay in this environment. As opposed to, Craig, I want to share my story with you of how I experienced trauma in my life. And I see that you might be going through that too, or there's something that I just want to share with you to get off my chest. Would you be willing to listen to what I have to say? And because I'm working through this, and I think you might be able to provide me or give me some feedback on how I'm doing and maybe hold me accountable to that personal improvement. I'd be all about that. But if you invite me into your world just to live in chaos and without any intentions of getting out of it or expecting me to fix it, then I can't open that door. I can't go down that path with you. And think about who we are as men. What do men like to do when there's problems? We like to fix things.
That's why our wives hate us.
That's right. And if we aren't able to help others fix it and others want to play the victim often, then there's a disconnect in that relationship. I'm not in. I'm Seacrest out. As a matter of fact, you are not going to invite me into that world. I won't live there.
See, that's where our jobs are very different. I sit with people in it all the time because I have to. Yeah, it's my job.
But your job is to help them move past it.
100%. And so that's oftentimes where I'll say, so what are we going to do with that? I hear you.
Right.
I'm sorry this happened. And I've worked with someone in the past who had a lot of bad, horrible things happen to them. And every time we met 5 times. They kept coming back to the same stories. I talk about plans to move forward, how to process, how to work through those feelings, writing notes, doing these things, confrontation of like this, having these conversations that this person needed to have. And on the 5th time, I finally said, why are you coming here? What's the point of all this? Well, because I'm going through this. Well, I know that. you've never done anything I've told you to do. Do you like where you're at? No, I don't like where I'm at. But you're not willing to change anything or embrace anything or walk through this hard stuff. Well, I'm coming here. That was a great first step. And one meeting ago, I was really proud of that. You get that as like your goal for one thing of come and talk to the pastor. And she left. And I thought, I might never hear from her, that person, again. I haven't. Because I just know that they weren't ready to face down. I don't think they disagreed with me. But at a certain point, what are we doing? Really, what are we doing?
Right.
I empathize. You still have my empathy. And
right.
You'll have my empathy even if you don't do anything. I love you. I'll care for you. I'll pray for you. But at a certain point, there are going to be people that are just going, I know the story.
If you are not willing to, and I'll reference a video that many people have seen. If you haven't seen It's Not About the Nail, guess what? It's about the nail. And it is... If we pull the nail out of the head, we fix the problem. But if we keep the nail in the head, if we allow the nail to stay in the head, we don't recognize there's a nail in the head, then we're always going to be in pain.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for you and I, and I get, we have personality, we have pretty strong personality types, but we've had things happen to us in our life.
Sure.
We both had, we didn't get a full deck of cards here or the other thing. There's an opportunity to use the tools around us. Let me use an example from my life that is not emotionally charged. So someone, I'm not going to try and unpack physical abuse or anything like that. I have a pretty severe learning disability. I'm really terrible at reading. In fact, I'm so bad that the state of Ohio said this young man can have all of his state tests read to him because it's the only way we get a fair shake for Craig to pass. Because if he has to read his own tests, he's never going to pass. And that's not fair either. We got to get him through school. So I had an IEP that said he can have all of his tests read to him by a professional aide, someone like your wife, who would come in and say, okay, Craig. And then I'd have to do the work, but they would read the entire state test book to me. That's a real issue. I don't have reading acumen like other people. I could say, well, hey, I just don't read as well. But I have a job that requires me to read a lot.
Yeah.
You might have heard of this book. It's called the Bible. It's really important to being a pastor.
Right.
It is a book. It requires you to read it a lot.
And it's thick.
People often say, well, how do you do it? And it's like, I just do it over and over and over again, and I read and read and read, and I don't always understand it. And by the time I preach one sermon, I might read a text 20, 30, 40 times because that's how long it took me to overcome it. I could have said, God didn't give me the reading ability of some of my colleagues in ministry. This ain't for me. Like, it's not for me. Or I could say, oh, that's the hand I'm dealt with. I have to grind at it and I have to work. I had to learn techniques. I had to learn different things. And now it's a part of my story so that when I got to talk to people that say, well, Craig, I really struggled in school and that's why I struggled to read the Bible. And I'm like, yeah, me too. No, I was really bad. Yeah, no, the state of Ohio literally didn't even let me read tests to myself. That's how dumb they thought I was. They're like, Craig can't even read to himself or he's going to fail. So I was the handicap that's to make it fair. They said, we have to let an adult read this to him.
Yeah.
I could use that my whole life and say, my reading didn't suddenly improve. My reading comprehension didn't suddenly improve. I've just had to deal with it. Right. And again, that's a minor thing. And I think it's important to use a minor thing because people aren't like, oh my gosh, that's a crazy. But we all have those things in our life. I actually wrote a book, the kid with the IEP that wrote a book, and it was written, my spelling and grammar is terrible. I had to hire Christina Yaniga, and in an 89-page book, I had over 800 edits. That's insane.
720 of them were commas.
That's insane. Guess what?
Yeah.
I wanted to write
it
book.
Anyway. Let me ask you a question because I think this is important because there's people out there saying, you know what? Yeah, those things happen, but you don't understand because life hasn't been fair to me. I've gotten a bad shake. Yeah. I started off at a different spot than you. I've been tight behind the 8 ball my whole life where you just had a couple of shots to sink the 8 ball. Well, we admit life is not fair.
100% not fair.
No one starts out in the same spot. The goal is just to finish.
Yeah, and it's
talk about that.
Do you want to say finish strong real quick?
I was going to say finish strong.
Dude, it's all right. It's all right. That's the thing, is you and I are having a realistic conversation. There are things like racism. There are things like sexism. There are things like bigotry that people have to overcome that are real trauma. 100%. This world is deeply broken. It is why I do my job, because I think Jesus is the only answer to the brokenness of man. But that can't be your excuse.
Right.
Well, I mean, it can be, but like, you don't know what I've been through. My life has been really hard. It's not fair. No, it wasn't. So you're telling me that even when it wasn't fair, it's time to move on and it's time to go? Yeah, and I'm not even being patronizing, like, put on your big boy pants. And I'm saying it's time to do the hard work. It's time, like I said earlier, you might have to climb Everest. Yeah. It's not fair that it put it in front of you. A child who's faced abuse, that's not fair. That's the worst thing that I can think that would ever happen to a child. It's not fair to them, but it is their life. And when they become an adult, they're going to have to deal with that one way or another. Our hope in listening to this is don't claim your victimhood as it has to define you.
Right.
Don't let society say, well, you're a victim and that's all you'll ever
Don't live
be.
in that house forever.
You don't have to. And there are people that want to help you.
Right.
Go beyond that. And likewise, there are people that want to keep you in that. Pick your company wisely in it.
That's right. We don't have to live in that environment. We can seek those out who want to help us. And there are people who want to help. There are people that want to help you move on, help us move on. We're two of those people, right?
Yeah.
I think we love seeing others grow in their own personal faith in their home, in their journey.
This person I met with, they're like, well, I'm sorry I've wasted your time, that I referenced earlier. And I said, you haven't wasted my time. It's been an honor to sit with you, to hear your story, that you've been vulnerable, that you've shared. That said, you need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it requires action.
It will only be a waste of time if you don't do anything. And that's when I will draw the line and say, hey, at a certain point, I'm not just here to go circles.
Right. And the complaining on Facebook and social media and otherwise isn't the self-help that you're looking for.
Having others that have been through hard things, if you're getting their applause. In fact, there are people that we all know that are really positive on social media, that they talk about embracing the day, that, you know, our friend Barry Peel talks about no bad days and stuff like that. And he actually gets some hate for that from people of like, well, I've had a bad day and so is Barry. He's just talking about putting on the mindset of, I will overcome today. I'm going to
tell you what I think is, it can be interpreted a different way is, and this is the victimization again. Oh, I've had a really bad day. I'm willing to bet that you had a bad moment in the day that you let ruin the entire day. And that's what happens with our lives in victimhood. You had a bad moment. You had a bad thing happen to you that you have let ruin the remainder of your life up to this point. So there might be bad moments. There might be that one bad minute or two or five, but there shouldn't be bad days unless you allow them to take place.
At the end of the day, we can kind of land the plane. There will be times where bad things happen to us.
Yeah.
There are times where listeners, our plea is to don't allow our twisted culture that says, hey, now you're unique. Now you're broken like the rest of us. Now you're this. To say, oh, I guess that's what I now have to be. I am my circumstance. I am a victim. What we're arguing is to say, you might have been victimized in your past. It's a part of your story, but it's not your whole story.
That's right. And that's a great way to wrap this up. So, Craig, thanks a lot for this conversation. Thank you for allowing me to get this off of my chest.
It might be our
feel
last
better.
one.
And this is a great way for us to go out.
Do you think people are going to, like, I feel like what we just said is common sense. It's a clarion call to our brothers and sisters of like, please don't stay there. Please don't sit down there. Please get up and walk. Take one step and I'll do it with you.
That's right.
Do you think they're still going to hate us for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Hey,
so
it
anyway,
was a good run, everyone.
Yeah, it sure was. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on Exceptionally
Average.
We'll see you next time.